Hello everybody, thank you for coming to take a look at what I've been up to. I was asked if I would be part of a collaboration. There's 4 of us that have got together to challenge each other, and the people that I've been working with, it's Gayle Agostinelli, Nancy Rose and Diane Hubert, and I've linked them all below so that you can take a look at what they've been doing as well. The challenge was to create something with vintage fabric, so it's called Variation on a Theme. So we've all got the same theme, vintage fabric, and we're all creating something with the vintage fabrics, and we're all putting the videos up today for you to have a look at. So you can have a look at my version of Variation on a Theme, what I've made, and then you can go across to their channels and see what they made as well. I've no idea what they made because, as I say, we're all putting the videos out at the same time today, so it's a surprise for us all. The only problem that I've had was I didn't really have any vintage fabric, but I had some reproduction vintage fabric and some old tablecloths, so that was what I used. So what I used and what I did was I've created a couple of journal covers that I'll be using in a future project, and I've made covers out of the vintage tablecloth to put those journals in. So this was just one large tablecloth that I've cut a section out, folded it up and made a little envelope to put the covers in. So I'll show you those covers. Excuse me, I've got a sore throat this morning. Okay, so these are the covers that I've made to go with the challenge. Both of them are made out of reproduction vintage fabric because, as I say, I didn't have any vintage fabric, not to be held back though. So I've made 2 out of the same fabrics, slightly different. This one, both of them are about 8.5 by about 6, and both of them will take signatures. So as I say, I will be using them. This one I put together, if I open it up, you can see that. I used different squares of the fabrics, and I've hand stitched this. I don't know if you call it slow stitching or cantha stitching, I'm not sure, somebody will know. So there's some stitching, hand stitching around it, and blanket stitch just there, some straight stitch there, and some French knots on that one. And then on the inside it's been lined and there's a pocket with the fabric, and I've also used some of the vintage the crocheted tablecloth there as well, and some lace. The picture there is actually from the kit that I'm going to be using. I think it's grandmother's garden, something like that. Some vintage buttons and a trim on there. So that's the first one that I made. And then the second one is the same kind of thing but done slightly differently. This one again is made out of squares of fabric. I watched Gina from Firefly Studios, who'd made a journal, and she used trim like this as her closure. So I hope you don't mind, Gina, but as that's the only vintage fabric I had, it just had to be used. But I loved what you'd done, so I've used it as well. Thank you. This one again is squares of the fabric laid out. But this time I've taken it to the sewing machine, and my sewing machine has a setting called vintage stitches. So I used vintage stitches to sew round the squares and join them together. Photograph on the front there. And there's a crocheted doily there that I've put on. That is vintage actually. And some trim across the bottom as well, and the little pocket that it makes there. And then on the inside again, I've put a pocket with a little butterfly on, and I hope you can see I've done some stitching round the edge there as well to decorate, and I used the red to coordinate with the red fabric that I'd used. So they're my 2 journal covers that I've made, my variation on a theme, vintage fabric, and the covers that I've made, the little envelopes that I've made for them to go in. So I hope you like those. And I just wanted to show you quickly how I put the covers together, because I think the other 3 ladies will be doing a show and create with me, craft with me, which I've not been able to do because I don't have a setup where I can show you, but I thought if I talk you through it, it might help. So for those of you that haven't made a cover like this before, I use a base. For these I had some, I think it's called interfacing, that's got an iron on one side. So use that as the base. And then the squares of fabric that I've had, I've just laid them on. This base piece is about 12.5 by just over 8. So then I've just laid the pieces of fabric on, any old order, it really doesn't matter, whatever is pleasing to you. Probably put that one there and that one there. So just laid them out in any order that you find pleasing to you. And then because what I used was iron on one side, I've just quickly pressed it with a hot iron, just pressed it down so that those pieces of fabric then slightly adhere to that interfacing, and that just means that they don't wiggle around, because on this one, when I did the hand stitching, I didn't want them to move. I wanted them to stay in place where they were. So by just pressing them down onto the iron-on interfacing, it just helped them stay in position while I sewed on them. This one slightly differently, as I say, because I did that on the sewing machine. And actually I included, once I'd done that, this part, putting the fabrics out, I had some quilter's wadding. If you don't have this, you can use a piece of felt or anything that's got a little bit of softness and depth to it. And I just layered it underneath and then stitched on my sewing machine round, and then it just gives it that kind of a bit of a quilted feel, I guess. So then when that's been finished and you've stitched around them and decorated it, I then did the lining as well. So that's just a quick overview of how I went about making these two covers. Any questions that anybody has, please do ask. So this is my challenge to produce something, variation on a theme. I can't wait to see what the other three have done. But this was my variation on a theme of my vintage fabric that isn't quite vintage, but that's what I had to use. So please do take a look, use the links below to go and have a look at what the other three have been doing. And as I say, that's Gayle Agostinelli, Nancy Rose and Diane Hubert. And I look forward to seeing if we do another challenge. And I'd like to thank you very much for taking a look. Thank you. Bye-bye.